All right. Good evening, everybody. I'll give you a minute as we filter into the room. Glad you're here tonight. Hope it'll be a helpful hour, learning about some high-level skills for doing better on your finals that are coming up. And I'm going to drink a bit of tea while we wait. I see the numbers increasing in the room. Tonight we're going to be recording this. We'll send you a copy of the deck. And so if you want to go back and look at it later or share it, it'll be here for you. Okay. Albert, you've already won the race. So cheers, my friend. All right. That's great. All right. So I think we're starting to hit a bit of a plateau here. We'll get a few folks filtering in over the next 10 minutes or so. I'll come back to my lovely hot tea as I want to do. So, all right, let's jump into this thing. Final exams, helping you guys do great on your finals. Before we start, we're asking one question we always want to find out is who is actually here. We're going to do a poll. It'll take you all of 28 seconds. Are you a student, parent, teacher? What grade are you in? Do you are looking for any support in any area? And would you want someone to reach out to you? If so, answer those 4, close it out, and then we're good to go. So that should be good. All right, now why don't we go ahead and jump in? So without further ado, let us begin the talk. Executive functioning, what is it? Now, it's a deeper concept than study skills. For over 20 years, I've been teaching study skills, but there's been a relatively recent reframing of the way the brain works, or understanding how the brain works using neuroimaging and fMRI research, and the understanding how the brain develops. And the long and the short, executive function skills are your ability to function in the world, to marshal your resources, to manage your environment, to prioritize, to plan. And these things are incredibly important academically. If you have really good EF skills, it'll help you with your academic success, with your studying, with your grades, but also these are life skills. It's going to help you manage all kinds of things. I've been working with students now as an EF coach for a number of years. And when I'm working with students, it's more than just what's going on with academics. It's also what's happening in your life, managing yourself, your emotions, what's happening, like taking care of your needs. What do you need? Looking at, summer activities, other things. I've been working with students going from high school, even to college. Now some of my kids are almost finishing college, and just watching them as they make these transitions. Now, the key skills have to do with planning, prioritizing, organizing, time management, self-monitoring. And obviously, when you're prepping, some of you may be still in the middle of AP week. We have APs coming up tomorrow through Friday. And then we have finals. If you're in the South, they're coming up in a couple of weeks. If you're up north, they're coming up in a month or so, depending on where you live. Ultimately, when it comes to the advanced skills for getting ready for finals and AP exams, planning, prioritization, organization, time management, understanding how much time I need, that's called time estimation, and then self-awareness that normally I tend not to do as well on my math final, therefore I should be putting in a little more time. I didn't do as well last year. I thought I did better. When I walked out, I thought I got a 90. I got an 81. Therefore, this semester, maybe I'll go and talk to my teacher. Maybe I'll go and talk to people who've done it before. Maybe I'll actually get some more information. It's helping you calibrate. What do you expect? Calibrating your comprehension level, your understanding, and getting attuned with, am I ready for what's coming on Friday or next week or thereafter? So there's a lot of self-awareness involved in being good at this. Now, when you're helping kind of think this through, the future sketch is I'm planning backwards to execute forward. So what that is I know I have a final, let's say it's in 10 days. And so the future sketch is I start looking at, here is where I have to be prepared in terms of the content I have to cover, the things I have to do to review. And I know that, globally, for me to get from A to Z, I need about 12 hours of work. And then the question is, how do I manage that, parcel that out between now and 10 days from now? Students who are relatively low on executive functioning skills may get distracted, sidetracked, other things. And suddenly, the day before the exam, they're trying to cram in 10 hours of work. How many of you out there have done that before? Show of hands. Sometimes there are definitely, I'm sure in this group, some people who tend to procrastinate, who end up, sacrificing sleep to get things done at the last minute. And then there may be a couple on this Zoom who tend to really look at the workload, the task at hand, how much time per task, how to put the most important tasks, and then they spread them out over the 10 days. And ultimately, when I'm working with students as an executive functioning EF coach, I'm trying to help them get better at the strategy, at the planning and the prioritizing, so they don't find themselves the day before having 10 hours of work to do, and it's already 1 in the morning. But I've definitely worked with students who that's been there before, and I try to get to a new reality where they get actually a decent night's sleep before their exam and they perform better, and they're not trying to cram it all in at the end. So a lot of it, looking back, we have an exam period coming up in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And so what I want to make sure people think about is past exams, either midterms this semester, as well as the exams last semester, in terms of how did you do going in, helping you calibrate, did my grade go up for the finals? Did they go down for the finals? What kind of finals my teacher gives, if I know this teacher, for the semester? What strategies were effective? What did I wish I did? So there's definitely a moment of stopping and looking back in order to plan forward. That is something that's really helpful, I believe. And it's knowing your patterns, knowing, what, I didn't give enough time to this, or all of my grades dropped during finals last semester. Was I overconfident? How prepared I was? Was I underconfident? I thought I was going to tank it and I did okay. Was I right on target? Part of it is helping you understand, helping you again calibrate your expectations and your sense of your readiness. Big deal. Now, when you're looking at your finals with all of my students, without exception, when looking at the finals period, we talk about what's your current GPA, what's my target GPA, where do I need to end up? And then certain grades, certain classes are much more important than others in terms of your performance. Working with students, like a 69 is the most essential grade of all the grades. We have one, if I'm off by a point, I get an F in the class. If I get one, if I get 2 points, then I pass the class. That's a pivotal grade. Also, there are pivotal grades if I have an 89 in the class versus I have an 84 in another class. That 89 class is so much more important. I get 1 extra point on that final, bam, I'm up to a 90. I have an A versus that B. And there's very little chance I can turn an 84 into an A on a final exam. Typically, I'm gonna get a B, and a B is a B, whether I push it up or down a little bit. But it isn't like a swing grade, which can really push me into a higher letter grade. Because many colleges, if they're evaluating you, are looking at on a 4.0 scale. And so a 91 is the same as 99, many cases, or an 81 is the same as 89. So you want to be mindful of those marginal, those boundary grades, really important. So here's a few examples. I have students who want to get an A or B in every class. In world history, I have an 88.4. I need a 92 on the exam to get the A. So then I'm going to put in a lot of work to make sure I push over that grade. I want that A. Environmental science, I have a 97. Let's say I've crushed it this semester. I could score in the 60s on the final and still get an A in the class based on how it accounts for our fit to the exam, the total grade. Therefore, I'm not going to push too hard on environmental. Honors algebra, I have an 84. I don't want to get, an A is not going to happen unless I just destroy it in the extra credit, but a C is possible. So I want to make sure I put in some time, but not as much. And then honors Spanish, I have an 80. This could easily become a C if I slip and get a 77 on the final. Therefore, I'm going to give this, some good time. So I'm going to prioritize world history first, and then Spanish, ultimately, and then honors algebra, and then environmental science. So part of it is understanding which of my classes are the most important. I have students doing the same exercise, looking at the APs they have coming up. I think last week, maybe this week, actually, one of my students was doing micro and then macro and then Euro. We were looking at it. It's like, what? I'm so confident. Like my teacher writes questions for the AP in economics and works for the College Board. So micro and macro, I'm going to get the grade I need. And for this person, they're going to college next year, and the college gives the same exact credit for a 4 or a 5. And this student felt like, I'm not going to push for a 5 because it doesn't matter. It's already in college, and a 4 and a 5 are the same for the credit at that. So it was like, these I'm okay, but Euro, I'm going to put more time in, more juice, because I know the 4 is not a sure thing on that class. So it's helping you calibrate, helping you think through strategy of where should I put my energy, my effort, my resources. Prioritization. It's one of the key things for looking at finals. What's really important, what's not so important. And even, prioritization of your classes, but within that, a lower level is prioritization of all right, there are 7 things on the final, but I know that I feel stronger with this one. And, do I want to reread the 12 chapters, or is it better for me to go through and really drill down the quizzes and the materials that are provided? Like, what's the higher priority? What's the higher net return? And what takes more time? And sometimes, me rereading the whole book might take me an extra 10 hours. Me reviewing the quizzes might take me 3 hours, but the bigger payoff is the quizzes. And so it's understanding what's a nice, if there's time, I can do some rereading, some review, but ultimately I'd rather review my notes and the quizzes and look at the sheet put together by the teacher. Those are much more important activities. So prioritization, how to study. Are there tests you already feel pretty confident about? Are there tests where the score is not as important to you? I kind of showed you an example of that earlier. And then you're going to craft your plan. And every subject gets its own plan. I think my student for Euro, so I'm going to probably put in 5 hours for Euro between, I met him last Tuesday, between Wednesday night and Friday morning, but micro macro, an hour and a half, 2 hours. Because again, he felt very confident, had good, good experiences, and felt the 4 was going to happen, probably even a 5, which wasn't going to even help him for college, because a 4 and a 5 were equivalent. So then we, how much time to allocate? Then how do I study? I'm going to study very differently for Spanish than I am for, for Euro than for micro. I'm going to be doing certain kind of problems for micro. I'll be doing certain vocabulary review for Spanish, and then estimating how much time is needed for every one of the tasks. So it's really important that you do this planning. It's one of the key principles of this. One of the big takeaways here is take the time to plan. Don't just jump in, crack a book, and start to review. That's not, in terms of executive functioning, prioritization, organization, planning, taking that, and my students I work with on EF skills, even every single night when they come home, my college students, before they begin their work, they have 3 assignments or, 3 or 4 assignments. We stop, take a couple minutes, and I have them prioritize. Like, how long should this take, do I think? How hard is this subject? And then how important is it? Is it due tomorrow? Is it due in a couple days? And then I make sure we do the hardest thing first, the hardest and most urgent thing first. And then, things that can push to the next day, those are later in the day. And if those get pushed, they're okay. But always having a plan before I begin, which not all students do. Some of you grab the first book out of your bag or the first thing in the first class, versus no, what's really important and what's the biggest cognitive lift? Do the heavy mental lifting first while you have the energy and resources and glucose in your brain. Because after several hours of studying, it's much harder to do a heavy cognitive task. Then I can just, do some math things or less, versus like a big lift of writing or a big lift of something really creative work. Do that first. Don't save that until your last thing when you've already spent a lot of your energy. Motivation. I really believe it's important that you have a goal in every single class. Before you begin, you actually write down, what do I want in this class? I currently have a 79. My goal is an 82 or above, or for sure passing. Or I've asked students, it's all about where you are. I have some students where I don't want to fail anything. That's my primary goal. That works. And so we can approach it accordingly. Other folks, I want to get 2 A's and 4 B's. I want to get a 3, 4 for the semester. Okay, let's look at that. Where are my E's? Where are my B's? Where are the A's? Help me understand it. And then, and like for a certain exam, it may be that, my goal is only an 85. So therefore that should help me figure out how many can I miss? How hard do I have to work? And in some cases, even getting a higher grade doesn't really make that much of a difference, and help you calibrate your progress. So to me, it's always strategy. It's knowing the system. It's knowing how much, how important this final is, the structure of the final. There's a really important figure in the field of ed psychology, Herman Ebbinghaus, over 100 years ago, he was very curious about memory, how memory works, and he began to use himself as a primary subject. And we have the Ebbinghaus curve, called the forgetting curve, thanks to him. And he would memorize nonsense syllables and track 1 round of review. How long does it stay? How long till the memory deteriorates? If I review it 2 times, how long the memory endures? When does it deteriorate? If I review it 3 times, and he found that when you, even the same amount of time, I could do, let's say, 1 hour of review of these words, vocabulary words, what concepts, all in one shot. I come back in a week and I've lost the vast majority of it. However, if I even spread that same amount of time out, I do 20 minutes, then the next day, 20 minutes, next 20 minutes. So the same hour over 3 days, and I retain it so much longer, a dramatic increase in retention. And part of it has to do with the way the brain is structured, the way the brain encodes memory into long-term memory stores. And every time it sees it anew, you reactivate this neural pathway of this neuron fires, that neuron fires. It's like, oh, the same pathway is firing again, and then happen again, and your brain is paying attention. Oh, geez, this thing's happened 3 times. This must be important. Because most of the time when your brain fires, you see, you have breakfast in the morning. Okay, I'm eating this kind of cereal, and you put it away. Like, is that meaningful or important? Probably not. Do I have to remember this in 5 days? No. Or someone, you see a sign on the street on the way to school, but you forget it. You see it one time, makes a singular impression, then it's gone. Versus if I keep seeing it again and again and again and again, it tells your brain, this is important, don't forget this. So every iteration of review locks it deeper and deeper into memory. So that's all to say, you don't want to do a mammoth session of studying. You want to take that same amount of time or even less time and break it up. And every time there's a new fresh round of it, you're encoding it deeper and deeper. You're changing the neurons. They're firing closer and closer together. So Ebbinghaus found that there's fast, rapid decay, but when you do it, more iterations, more intervals of study, much, much higher retention rate. So if you want to retain something, you want to break it up into smaller pieces. A few other things in terms of taking a rest is actually really, really effective. If you learn something, then take a short nap. It helps the brain encode it, lock it into memory. And there's higher retention, less interference. So taking a break is great. Taking a nap is great. Breaks are awesome. When to study, if you have like a reading period for finals and you have a few days off, knowing, when am I freshest? Am I best in the morning? Am I best at night? Everyone's different. And when should I tackle my most cognitively intense subject? Some people, it's the first thing in the morning. Some people, their brain isn't only half on then. They're going to be better to review it in the early afternoon. Know yourself, know your biorhythm. This will also be a big factor when you're in college in terms of when to take hard classes. Some students, they're really fresh in the morning. Other people like myself were worthless in the morning, and I was way better later in the day. And so I didn't have any classes before noon by the time I was a junior, and I did very well in college. So it's knowing yourself, knowing your brain, knowing your biorhythm. Breaks are really important because, again, you do deplete your glucose stores. Your neurons, your synapses get fired, and they need, they get tired. It's important to have breaks. So the idea of doing a marathon 3-hour session is a miserable idea. After an hour and a half to 2 hours, stop, put the book down, go for a walk, and do something else, something less cognitively intense. If you keep working for 3 or 4 hours in a row, it's something called a law of diminishing returns. You get less and less in subsequent half hour, and even negative returns. Eventually, you begin to interfere with stuff you learned earlier, and then you're hurting yourself. So marathon sessions are a disaster. They may feel like they're good, but all of the science in the world, all the research says this is the worst way. It's inefficient, and you're actually, maybe you're perceiving this as, oh, I'm learning so much, but in fact, you're not going to be retaining it or encoding it long term. So breaks are great. I like taking half-an-hour breaks. I use my stopwatch, use my Apple Watch, and use a little timer. Some of my students, they start taking a break for an hour, and then they want a break for 20 minutes, and then suddenly it's been an hour and a half. So you have to know yourself. Do I tend to drift? Do my breaks get super elongated, or do I really keep to a certain time frame? Know yourself, know how you work. And this is, there's a really important theory of interference, that the brain can handle limited information over a fixed period of time. And that if you keep packing in more information, you start squeezing out, interfering with other information. The brain is not limitless. Our brains have limits. You can't just keep pouring it in, especially on the same subject matter, because content begins to compete. And I find this, like if I'm playing podcasts, if I play one podcast and put it away and change tasks, I have a much better chance of going back and retrieving, what was that podcast? Oh yeah, that was the thing. That was the environmental thing, and looking at, waste and recycling. Versus if I play 6 podcasts in a row, what happens is they begin to interfere. And then suddenly it's like it gets mashed up and you don't encode it as well. There's a very good chance I'll remember either the first podcast, or the very last podcast. But there's a much better chance I'll forget the middle. And that's the way the brain works. It focuses on primacy, what came first, and recency, what happened last. And you tend to devalue things that happen in the middle. Is the way the brain is designed. There's also a thing of similarity principle. If I switch topics, there's less interference. So let's say I'm going to work for 4 hours with little breaks in between. If I do an hour of math, then switch to an hour of history, than an hour of Spanish, that's a lot better than doing 4 hours of Spanish for retention and encoding. And so the longer you stick on a single topic, the more interference and the less encoding in the long-term memory. So you want to interleave subjects, you want to mix it up, and more breaks. I mean, there's more beginnings, more endings, and the brain likes that. Things that help your attention reset are getting away from the cognitive stuff. So after you're doing heavy cognitive work, I'm studying, I'm memorizing, I'm learning, I'm doing micro problems or Euro review. You could go and play Fortnite, you could go on Instagram, you could do social media. But honestly, one of the best ways is to take giving your eyes a break, and also just your mind a break, your synapses a break, doing like looking at something, looking at greenery, taking a walk. What I would often do when I was in high school, I would lie in the bed and just cover my eyes and sometimes play music, and I would just give myself a brain from processing. So it's not, I put the book away and then bam, where's my phone? It's like giving your brain time to not be firing and not be in that mode is really helpful. It helps you restore your attentional system. So taking a walk is great. Some of my students go play basketball, and actually I have them build it into their schedule. We're going to work, between 9 and 12. Then we're taking an hour, half an hour for lunch, and an hour for basketball, then come back. So having breaks is part of a good schedule. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Changing context. It's also helpful. Not everyone does this. There's research which shows that when you review material in different physical environments, you also are laying down more robust, memory traces, and there's deeper encoding. So what that would say is if I review the same material for an hour in my bedroom, and then I go down and review it for an hour in the kitchen, and then I go and review it outside on the patio, or I go and review it in the library, and I review it for an hour in a different place in a Starbucks with my headphones on. They're saying every time you review it in a new physical environment and context, your brain is picking up new cues. Oh, this matters here, and this matters here, and this matters here. This seems to be really important. And the fact that I'm changing physical stimuli and visual cues, the brain seems to say this is more important information. I didn't always do that, but this is the academic research. I often in high school, I would study in my room, and that was my place, and I would just review, and that was in college, I had a few places, a few libraries I would study, but my room wasn't as helpful, but at high school, I had my study spot. So anyhow, that's some of the academic research if you want to try that and try learning in different environments. And the most important thing, I think, in terms of where you're studying is the quality of the environment. And I've done work with my students over the years as an executive functioning coach is let me look at your environment. Let's talk about your environment. Where are you trying to get work done? And what do you have open? What are you competing against? Are you trying to inhibit distractions? And even like 15 years ago, I had students who were spending forever on studying, but I learned even back then, they had Facebook open. They had other apps open. They were texting their friends and messaging their friends while they were studying. And their 7 hours of work ended up being probably 3 hours of quality work, and it wasn't that good quality. It would have been way better for them to spend 2.5 hours focused with everything apps, everything closed, and then go and talk to your friends uninterrupted, interact with your friends, talk to your friends, versus trying to do both at once. Trying to parallel process, the brain is crap at that. We are not designed for parallel processing. We are typically 97% of people are monotaskers. We can do one thing well. If I give myself two demands, I'm playing mental ping pong. I'm going here, then here, then here, then here, and both tasks are degraded. Only 2 out of 100 people can really multitask without degrading performance on 2 tasks. That's 2 out of 100. And so most of us, many of you may think, well, that's me. That's 2 out of 100. Most of us perceive ourselves as being able to do it. When you actually measure performance, it's not great. And so the name of the game is helping you have one task at a time. And so when I'm working, and I have most of my students put their phones away. They charge them in the kitchen, other places. When they're trying to work, when it's time to play, go get your phone. I can play Fortnite. I can go on Snapchat. I can talk to my friends, whatever it is. Instant messaging. I'm on some silly text chain. We're doing whatever it is. I'm swiping on ESPN things. But ultimately, when I'm trying to study, I'm studying. So the more of a disciplined environment you have, the less you have to rely upon your willpower to focus. So this is a key thing in terms of EF skills is managing your environment. Really important piece. Too much stimulation. There are people who have a big visual cup, or like, visual information, I take it all in, and then I can't really focus. There's a lot happening visually. If there are screens moving and things happening, I have a hard time focusing. In a similar fashion, some people are, in terms of auditory processing, if there is too much sound, even for me, if there's a clock that's ticking, I have to work really hard to inhibit that sound and try to focus. I do much better in a quiet room. I do much better. So when I'm studying, actually, I play music, but certain kinds of music, certain kinds of rhythm, and then it drowns everything else out. And some people use headphones, so whatever it helps. But for me, if there's external noise, I don't study as well. There's a lot of things, visual distractions, I don't do as well. And so for me, I'm definitely a monotasker, and I imagine many of you are. And to me, it's important that I manage my environment. And I think for many of you, it'll be a nice thing to help as well. So a good environment, fewer distractions. You have tools. I chew gum when I study. I drink tea when I keep filling it up and go back and forth. And I play certain soundtracks, certain music. I have a Pandora station that I really like, or an iTunes account, whatever you like to use, for Spotify. But I definitely have my studying Spotify list. There's still some soundtracks I've played 1,000 times, which have helped me. I played them through college and grad school and doctoral work and my other work. It's important also you really keep a nice organized desktop or laptop or whatever you're working on, in terms of what's open, what notifications are pinging you, do you know where to find things easily and readily? And this, being mindful about your distractions. Everyone has their distractions. They're ways they procrastinate. For me, I'm a kind of a news junkie, and I can lose myself in the news cycle, and I can start going down rabbit holes. And everyone, whatever it is, some people it's gaming. I have one student who's into big esports, he's going to play esports in college, and he goes and logs in the queue, waits to join a game. But the question is, will you join one game? It's not World of Warcraft. It's one of the other ones, like League of Legends. It's something he loves to play. But he, if he plays, he can start playing 5 games and he loses, he gets mad, go play again. And suddenly it's spent 2 hours in there. For me, it's news. I can open up Reuters or CNN or other things, or New York Times, and then suddenly I can be an hour and a half in. So what I've done, I actually have website blockers. I use the Stay Focused app on my computer. And after more than 10 minutes on Reuters or CNN, it says, shouldn't you be working? And it's like, yes, I should. Thank you so much. On my iPhone, I also use a screen time application. And then I have certain things locked out. After more than 10 minutes on CNN, it grays out and it locks out. Some of my students, they lock certain things down between 4 and 6. They lock down certain applications. Or I have other friends, other students of mine who are like, what? I want to minimize distractions. I'm not going to open Snapchat, other things, but I'm going to let a couple people, be able to text me, but only those select few get through. Everyone else gets blocked during these times. So there are ways to manage your devices, but the gold standard is keeping your device charging somewhere else while you're working, and then going and chatting and texting and DMing your friends and so forth. So be careful every time you switch tasks, every time there's an interruption, you process things less, you encode things less, your memory retention will be degraded. So every time there's a message that comes up and I go off my history homework to that message, I have just processed whatever I was reading in a more shallow way. I'm going to remember it less effectively. So disruptions are really problematic. So don't think you aren't affecting yourself, even if it takes longer, but also whatever processing you're doing is degraded. So we are decreasing our learning. In a perfect world, I want a clean division as I can get between when I'm working, when I'm playing, at all times, getting ready for my exams. And also be mindful of making what's hard easy, what's easy hard. What that means is if your distractions are right in front of you, they're too easy, put them away. So have the phone charging in the kitchen. And if other things are harder, put them front and center. Make your work right in front of you. It's really an important thing. So be mindful. If I'm procrastinating, have a plan of how you're going to counter those tendencies. Negotiate with yourself. If I finish 20 pages of this review, this reading, then I'll go play Fortnite or whatever I'm into. And also don't save the hardest task for last. Do the hard things first, and then you've earned some kind of reward. So this is regulating your motivation levels. Big fan. One of the key EF skills is how to get help, how to know when you need help, and not wait till the end when suddenly your exam is tomorrow. You realize I need help. It's too late. Office hours were 3 days ago. So that's one of the reasons why you want to start early, help you calibrate. Do I need some more support? Do I need a little bit of tutoring? Do I need some extra help? And then, have enough humility to go get the help you need. And it's really important that you learn how to self-advocate, to take care of yourself. You'll need these skills a lot more even once you're in college, to identify, when there are fewer supports around you. Like in high school, you have more scaffold, more supporting. Once you're on your own in college, you have to know, I need some help here, and then when to ask for that help. So breaks are important. You don't want big, huge cram sessions. They're not very effective. You want to use technology and tools. Most of my students use a digital calendar, but I have many also use paper, and they structure it out on a planner. What things are coming up using your Google Calendar. I'm doing my AP Science work here. I'm taking a break, doing my math worksheets here, taking a break. You can really break things out. And before your exams, I've often helped students go through like their entire exam week in terms of when I'm prepping. And again, you'll notice I do a lot of interleaving. So if I do English for an hour and a half, history for an hour and a half, I'll wake up at 9, I'll do some math, I'll review my missed problems, then change over to history timeline. I'll have lunch, and I'll go play basketball, whatever, back to English, look at the quotes, go to history, the essay topics. So I'm interleaving, I'm varying. And that's really a key thing. I have breaks built in, I have physical activity built in, and I have different topics built in. That's a best practice. So before your exams are coming up, see if you can do that, whether you're using a digital calendar or a paper calendar, or just even just a piece of paper. Kind of right. This is, again, the planning before you actually implement is a very good strategy for students. And every time you have a new session, I'm prepping, I'm working for an hour and a half. There's something of GOAT. You want to have a goal for that hour and a half. I want to cover these 30 pages or these 15 pages of examples. I'm going to work these microeconomics things. I have a goal per session. Organization, I know, I have the tools I need. Everything is lined up. The times on my calendar. My attention is there. I'm not distracted. I'm focused on that piece. I have breaks needed. And then one of the key things is you test yourself. Never just review and review and review. There's an idea of chunk, chew, check, which chunk is I bring things down to smaller intervals. Then I stop and I chew. I actually reflect and I think about what I just learned. And then I test myself. I check myself. Did I actually learn this thing? I never just go and read for an hour and a half. The brain can't hold all that. And ideally, even after every 10, 15 minutes, you stop. If I'm reading a 30-page history chapter, after every 5 pages, I want to stop and what did I just review? Why does it matter? How's it tied to other things? And let me go through it. So this is tied to that, I check myself. That's a great way to reinforce learning, to encode things deeper. Because if you just read for an hour and a half, you're not giving yourself enough cues that this really matters, and you aren't doing enough checking and reinforcing. And every time you test yourself, it locks it longer into memory. Chunk, chew, check. That's part of it. So check your comprehension, smaller bits, smaller chunks. Catherine Kirza, she's great. And then a few other techniques, tips, learning how to review. So it's more important. I mentioned, like, you don't want to just read for an hour and a half, ever, under any circumstance. You just read and read and read. That's not how you get ready for exams. Even if that's how you did it for last year, it's proven to be less effective than other methods. So you need to be generating, you need to be creating, linking things, working with things. You have to have, it's called errorful learning. If there isn't the possibility of making mistakes in my retrieval of information, then I'm not really learning. So just me passively reading for an hour and a half is errorless learning. I'm not getting any feedback. Am I getting this? Do I understand this? So never, ever just go for an hour and a half. You have to be working with the material. I'm either drawing a map, I'm writing things down, I'm making diagrams, I'm making ideas, and also not highlighting, which isn't that helpful either, or underlining. I have to be working with it in an active way if I really want to learn it, retrieve it, retain it. So you have to be generating. It's called generative study. Little things I'm writing, I'm making as I'm reviewing. Very important. Generating all the time. And the quality of processing really matters. It's better for me to process things deeply, working with it, integrating it, than just kind of passively reading it over it a bunch of times. So the kind of processing leads to improved retention. When you've done, Dunlowski and some other colleagues, Willingham, he's a powerhouse, they looked at what actually is beneficial for learning and for retention. You reading a passage, then summarizing at the end, it's okay, but not as useful. Highlighting, underlining, not very useful. Imagining things in your head as you read them, not as useful, because there's no room for error, mistakes here. Rereading something. Let me read the chapter. Let me read it again. Not very useful, because again, you're not generating feedback or errors. Things that are very helpful are using practice testing. If I read something, then I quiz myself. Did I actually learn the content? Let me go and do some forced review. Let me look at the concepts. Can I cover them and spit out and retrieve and recall the definitions or the matching things? So practicing, with testing is hugely important. And then distributing practice. Is it better for me to do 3 hours in a block, or do an hour, break, an hour, break, an hour, break? And when you distribute the practice, it's much more effective for coding and learning. And then interleaving, there's a moderate evidence for this, that's where I do chemistry and then Spanish and then English, then back to chemistry versus doing it all in a row. So there's research backing this up. But I want to keep hitting home the importance of testing, of generating feedback. You have to be able to make mistakes. If you aren't making mistakes when you're reviewing, you're not doing the best reviewing. And so when you test yourself and you retrieve information, you're actually changing the synapses and the neural pathways in your brain. Every time I have to retrieve something from memory, I am actually strengthening the neural pathways and the synapses become more robust, versus when I'm passively reading, it doesn't happen. So it's called forced retrieval or forced recall. When I make myself what actually happened in Georgia in 1784? And do I actually know it? And when I make myself pull it back from memory, it locks deeper into memory. So it's self-testing, self-quizzing. It's called unaided recall, really an important thing. And you test yourself by going and explaining to somebody else. Whenever they've done research on peer tutoring, the peer who gets the bigger advantage and the bigger benefit is the one who's doing the teaching. When I'm teaching you something, I'm actually reinforcing it and encoding it deeper into my memory. So when I'm explaining to my parents, to my pet, to the wall, I'm learning it better. When I do flashcards, are actually crazy powerful. Because again, I see a concept. Do I know it? Yes, no. Can I retrieve it? And every time I pull it back, I lock it deeper in memory. Flashcards is great. Quizlet, you may find a pre-made Quizlet very helpful. Quizzing somebody else using, I in high school and college and grad school, I used divided notes. And so I'd have the concepts on one side and a line that I have like definitions. And so I could cover one side or the other and quiz myself. I can cover the definitions and say, what's the word? I can cover the word and say, what's definition? And then I can go back and forth. Either you follow the page or cover with paper. And then making notes, making a, kind of a review sheet, walking yourself through piece by piece, a chapter, a concept map, whatever it is. And then there's just some showing you some evidence, some research. Is it better to put things in big blocks, ABC, or break it up, interleave it? And the research shows that immediately, as I'm practicing, the ones who are blocking are more accurate. They're doing these big, huge, like 3 hours of physics, 3 hours of chemistry. But then you test them in a week, and the ones who had 3 different individual passes at it did better and have much better recall and accuracy. So again, this is just, this is research. And so you want to switch topics. You want more beginnings and endings. You want to have more breaks. You never want to just review things that are perfect. You want to make mistakes. If the learning is passive, it's not ideal. So if I get a perfect copy of the teacher's notes, that's not as good. I want to be working with it, integrating it, making changes. I mentioned how to rehearse things, doing pros and cons, study guides, concept maps, drawing, graphing things out. Self-testing. Sometimes there are memory strategies. I did a lot of mnemonics when I was in high school, when there was more memorization, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, like lighting things up, making little rhyme things. I remember I make little songs up. Also, there's all this evidence about visual encoding. If I can graph things, put things in a visual way, it's easier to remember than just semantically the text. So we're really good at using visual cues for memorization. I can draw something or make a connection and kind of memorize this piece. It's very helpful. Or things like, homes, what are the big rivers, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. Homes just sticks, acrostics, those things stick. The big 5 personality features, I use the word ocean, where it's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, certain things just lock in forever. And they're easier having this nice visual or mnemonic device. And when you want to improve memorization, it's all about connections, things that are linked together, neurons that are firing together, tend to wire together. Yeah, an idea without a home is it's going to be out there, but if I link it to other concepts, they're going to ground better. And so part of it is linking things in chains, and semantic chains is really helpful. It's called chunking. I'm going to link this idea to this idea, and these things are connected, and they embed deeper in memory. We mentioned mnemonics, like Sokotoa, sign, opposite hypotenuse, all these things are just in there for forever. They stay with you for years. Other mnemonics, every good boy does fine, or other things like that for music, associations, narratives, X, Y, Z. Okay. And then, whatever helps you get creative. I would use like plenty of like songs or music, trying to remember certain long chains of things. I would chunk them together like that. And then certain people like to use colors when they're reviewing, like, people may be blue or places may be red, whatever, things like that. Some students, for formulas are going to be in yellow. I never did this, but some students do. And again, finding what works for you is the key. And then asking yourself questions, writing things down, self-quizzing, very important. So then timing is really a big deal. How much time do I need? How often should I take breaks? Knowing yourself after 50 minutes, some students for sure need a break in a huge way. Some can go a little bit longer. It's knowing yourself, half an hour, they need a break. So know yourself, know your mind, know your attention system, and also know your opponent, know the exam. Get as much information as you can about what's coming, getting a picture of the number of questions, type of questions, what counts the most, and so forth, and get all the intel you can from a teacher, former classmates, upperclassmen, if you have that, like what's his exams like, her exams like, what do you remember? Go to study hall. Sometimes they give you a gem in a review session that you don't get if you don't go to that, even if it's outside of the class. So I'm definitely a fan of getting as much information as I can about what's coming. And then I prepare for the test in terms of knowing what I need to know, how it'll be scored. Is there partial credit? How important is it to my overall grade, as I mentioned earlier in strategy? And then, you're focused, you're putting away your distractions. You may have music. I strongly prefer instrumental music. Some people can handle lyrics. For me, only if like I can do Enya or a few other, but typically lyrics are distracting to me, but some people can do it. Just know yourself, know your mind. And so then we're going to look at our notes, study guides, look at the text, X, Y, Z. And if there are in the back of the book, like study questions, any kind of self-testing you can do, that's brilliant. If there are like diagrams or things, maybe cover part of it, quiz yourself on the diagram, do very active, reading. Don't just passively just go through and gloss over it. Stop yourself, test yourself as you're reading, and write things down, make mistakes. And the more you're generating, the more you're making mistakes, the better. I'm gonna skip that. All right, the day of the test, when the exams come, obviously make sure you have your stuff you need, your pencils, paper, your calculator, whatever. Something will let you bring a note, a sheet of notes in, 1 page, whatever it is, make sure you get it all ready. Sleeping and eating right are very important. The sleep you get the night before the test often isn't as important as the night before that. So if I have a final exam Friday morning, the sleep I get Wednesday will have a great effect on how I feel on Friday morning. So again, Thursday, and some of you may notice about yourself, like even if I get bad sleep Thursday night, I could be okay Friday. If I get bad sleep on Wednesday, I'll often be very tired on Friday. So you need good sleep 2 nights prior. That's really a big deal. And you want to make sure you have glucose, because thinking takes energy and the brain burns glucose. Make sure there's sugar in there, some slow burn stuff. Make sure there's some protein, burn a little more slowly, give you energy longer than the fast sugars. Sarah, one of our great tutors, educational powerhouses at our company, talks about the battle plan. Again, finding out everything you can about the test, scoring the resources you can and can't use. Is there a study guide? Do you have notes on previous tests? Is there a textbook you can practice from? Then you have your plan, the kind of review. Where do you plan to do the review? What kind of distractions are there? What's my schedule going to look like? And then finally, chunks, small chunks. We talked about this many times. How do I plan to keep myself accountable? What's my, if I have 10 hours of work, can I break this up over 10 days, over 6 days? Should I check? I have students who love checking things off physically off paper. I never did this, but they're going to write down after they do these 15 things to get ready for this exam. After everyone they do, they cross it off, a line through it, and they feel like I'm making progress. It helps them. Some people have an accountability buddy. I used to prep with friends for AP exams, especially friends who are a similar level and like-minded, and like we would have fun and play and be silly, but also we could actually get work done. My best friend and I both went to college together, and we were friends in high school, and we were best men at each other's weddings. So in the grand scheme of things, you may find someone who's similar of mind, who could help you advance your cause and help you study and explain things. But oftentimes, we were like pretty well matched. But be careful about who you're prepping with. Some kids just want to screw around. Some kids are really focused. Make sure you choose your study partner pretty well. And then finally, do you expect you'll need some help? Might you go talk to a teacher or a parent to help you draw flashcards, other things, with a friend? And then in some cases, go get a tutor. I have students who are really grappling. They're on the verge of failing physics. I'm like, go and get a tutor for physics. It's not worth risking failing that class. But it's knowing yourself. Or I'm on the cusp of an A, and if I have a little more help, if I can't get the help I need through the teacher, sometimes outside help is really helpful. Go find someone who has a PhD in chemistry, and they can help you with your chemistry problems beyond Khan Academy. So, and then finally, having your plan. And if things aren't working, be willing to pivot, that's why often it's best to start early. If you have to just shift and then course correct. And eventually you'll find a system that works for you. But I want you to, try. And if things didn't work as well last time, try something different. Don't keep repeating the same system if it didn't work as well. Try to innovate and experiment. That's really important. Coming up, what's today? Today is the 10th. May 11th, there is, for the class of 2025, we're doing a great thing about college application process. Then on the class of 2024 on May 18th, and 2025 again on May 25th. We have some experts. We'll be there talking about testing, talking about admissions, talking about essays, activities, and many of these will be very helpful. And then in terms of Applerouth, things that we do, we help kids get ready for tests. We help kids with academic work, physics, chemistry, history. We help kids with executive functioning coaching, helping kids get organized, strategy, and so forth. So we can help you if you need help with a plan. We're ready to help you if you need help. So let us open this up and talk about your questions. It is now 8:47. We have 13 minutes. I'm going to open up my question and answer box. What are questions you have that I can be helpful with? I want to be useful to y'all. And anything I haven't answered, just type it in the Q&A window. I'll see it and I'll be able to respond immediately to it. Are there any questions? And if there aren't any questions, that's okay too. All right. Do you have specific advice to combat the summer slump? So the summer slump, part of it, I always really liked taking my summers and I was never that academically focused over the summertime. I was honestly a summer camp kid. And so my summer camps, I'd be gone. I was working on staff at camp for 10 weeks of the summer. And so, the things that are important are always keep reading, and reading whatever interests you. Of course, you have your required reading for the fall, for your English class, history class. But other than that, things that engage you, interest you, that's my primary category for combating, and also just keeping your mind engaged. We didn't have podcasts when I was, in high school in the 80s and 90s, but ultimately, keeping your mind engaged. So keeping learning, keeping reading, and keeping expansive, but letting your students explore areas that are interesting for them, not as academically oriented. Let them choose things that are meaningful, interesting for them. Musical options. For music, geez, I love like electronic music when I'm studying, and there's one album like Daft Punk. I've played again like the Tron Legacy soundtrack and the remix for. I've played that probably hundreds of times. There's a singer called Enya who's like this ethereal backgroundy stuff, and I've played that maybe 1,000 times from college until now. And I, put it on like often repeat when I'm really working for hours. And so, but other people, I've done jazz. I used to play a Bob Dylan thing, whatever you're into, finding a music. But again, one that's not going to take your mind off it. And one, I like having a driving rhythm. So that's why I like Daft Punk is really great. I can work longer with that music playing than I can without. But everyone's different. You're going to find out, just find what you like, try it out, experiment. How long should breaks be depends upon your brain and the way you work, and also how long you study. But so if I just prep for an hour and a half, I probably need a good 20 minutes break. And I wouldn't recommend ever going more than 2-3 hours. 2 hours, probably I think at the most. Then take a break, come back. And the breaks themselves, how late in the day? Have I been studying for like 5 hours on and off? I did a 2-hour session, half an hour off, 2 hours on. Then I may need longer breaks. But typically, it's some people believe in 50 minutes on, 10 off. Some go hour and a half on, 20, 30 off. Some it's like after 3 hours period of taking like over an hour. Know yourself, gauge when you feel yourself getting focused again, when you can come back, and you might experiment with this. But a minimum of 10 minutes. And ideally your breaks include getting up, walking around, moving your body, stretching, throwing a ball around, doing something that's not cognitively intense. But yeah, breaks are your best friend. I'm a huge fan. Why is rereading considered bad? The reason that the researchers, they found that just reading a text again does not really contribute to better comprehension or encoding into long-term memory, because it's passive, it's errorless. I can't get any feedback of, do I actually understand it? So I read it again. Do I actually know what parts I get and don't get after reading it? Not really. Versus when I do self-testing and I query and I make myself retrieve it and I say, do I actually know this? Let me cover it and try to retrieve it. Okay, the first thing was about this. Then oh, actually, I was wrong about that. I didn't have this right. This concept was mixed up in my head. I only get that through getting feedback, through testing, through interacting with and making mistakes. So rereading that's passive, you're really not, and I could show you a lot more research about this. There have been many studies that rereading is relatively ineffective compared to any kind of self-testing. It's pretty profound, the differences. Kids who test themselves, because again, every time you're testing yourself, you're locking it deeper and deeper into memory. Every round of testing, my neurons are getting deeper, but rereading it doesn't have the same effect, having to retrieve it from memory. So typically, if you're not making mistakes, if there's no chance of making mistakes, your learning is very much suboptimal. So nothing passive, that's the rule. How do you get kids to buy into this? I talk about, typically most kids want to be efficient with their time. They don't want to spend, if they have 2 hours to study, they want to be doing the most effective thing. Because again, then they get more time back to play and screw around and have fun and go on Snapchat or go on Instagram or go and play video games, which is great. I want them to have video games and fun and play. And so my thing is, I want to make this work as efficient and economical as I can to get you as much time back for fun and play as humanly possible. And so if we get more efficient at this stuff, if we get using testing and self-testing and getting organized, you're going to have more time uninterrupted to actually talk to your friends, interact, be social, play games, which is much more fun and compelling to kids. So I talk in terms of their language of what they get. And ultimately, the name of the game is efficiency, economy, and more time to actually have a good time and less time, because if kids are not studying effectively, efficiently, everything takes longer. And also it's not as satisfying, and then the grades aren't as good. So that's part of, I explain the research, and I want to get you what you want. My student is a straight A 9th grader. Their school is doing college level math with self-study style in the classroom. Their finals coming up. They'll cover the entire year of learning. What are your suggestions for study strategies? So if I'm doing a 9th grade year, I'm covering the entire year. Well, part of it, I have to understand the nature of the exam, the way it's structured, what's on it. Am I going to have formulas provided? Not for, like, what am I not on the hook for? And then doing review, I'm assuming if it's math, it's going to be cumulative. I'm probably going to start closer to the beginning, and I'll be doing review sessions in terms of doing the review problems. If you have quizzes, tests, papers throughout the year, the most important thing is going back and reviewing those, especially anything you missed. Any mistakes you made are gold, and make sure you really learn those. And again, self-testing, self-quizzing, building myself through, going chapter by chapter. And then ultimately you quizzing myself. If there are formulas, I can use Quizlet back and forth, but have different sections. This is section, chapter 1 through 2, 2 through 3, have it be additive and have it build upon that. And then as I'm growing, then I'll review the first 2 chapters, then 3 and 4, then 5 and 6, and I'll stop and I'll do a review of 1 through 6. Then I'll go on to the next one. Like, it's breaking things up into pieces, not having one huge effort, like stopping and doing more testing as I go through each section. That's how I would do it. And I create a schedule of what I'm on the hook for and how long I think it might take, and I try to break it up over the course of time before my exams, my finals. How far in advance do you recommend studying for a final exam? For example, I have finals in 2 weeks. When should I begin studying? So again, part of it is knowing yourself, knowing the topic, knowing the grade, knowing the goal. And I have some students, again, like they have an A in the class. They're not worried about the final. They may only if they tank it. And so I have a student who, for this class, he has a 94. He might put in 4 hours for this class. However, the other class, he has an 87, 88. The chance of getting an A, but he's not as strong in that class. He or she might allocate 10 hours to that 87. And so and also, like, what's the subject? How hard is it? What do I know from my previous experience, my midterms, my last semester grades? 2 weeks is plenty of time to begin for finals. I think that's appropriate, but again, do I need 4 hours to get ready for this test, or do I need 15? And that's going to be very personal. It's going to be individual to you. Looking at your past experience, looking at the content, looking at the amount of material you're on the hook for. Like for AP US, AP Euro, back in the day, I spent well over 20 hours getting ready for those things. But these were in the 90s, and it was so much memorization. The current APs aren't like that anymore. But I had to memorize hundreds and hundreds and so I spent a long time, and I had huge study sheets after study sheets. But that doesn't, every class was different. And then for physics or science, it wasn't near that. So it's going to depend upon you. But I think between 2 weeks and a week is appropriate to begin doing some review. And again, knowing that it's better, even if I do half an hour a night for a week, and then I built up 7 sessions of 30 minutes, that's 3.5 hours, that's superior to doing like a 5-hour big block, right? So breaking it up into sections over time is actually really great for long-term encoding and reinforcement. All right. It is now 8:57. Are there any final questions? We have a couple more minutes left before we rock and roll. Okay. Well, maybe that's it. So in that case, everybody have a lovely night. Thanks for coming out. We'll send you a copy of the deck and the recording. And if you need any help with anything, we are around. It's what we do. So everybody have a great night.